quickly, I think everyone knows who we all are from the pictures on the website, but briefly, I'm Chitra Nabat with the Business News Network. This is Eric Brown from the Watson Group at IBM, world famous. Eric says it's all the IBM marketing. Stowe Boyd from GigaOM, Aaron Smith from Pew Research, and I guess Aaron's going to start off our conversation because we want to set the tone, set the context around the future of work. There's been, Pew has done this research study, a lot of input contributors from different places, so we want to frame the discussion before we then drill in further. Does that sound good? Is everybody awake? Yes. Does that sound good? And actually, before we start, who is worried about the future of work and if they're going to have a job? Who's worried? Hands up. So only like 10% of the people. How many of you own your own companies? And how many of you, so the rest work for somebody else? And most people in this room should be worried about the future of work. I know I am. So with that, to start us off, Aaron, please.
Thanks, Chitra. And if y'all aren't awake, I'm going to wake you up because I talk fast and I'm real loud. And I'm going to keep this moving because I know we're on a hard deadline to quit. So as Chitra mentioned, we just did a study looking at AI robotics in the future of work where we surveyed about 2,000 experts, practitioners, thought leaders, academics in the field of technology, including my co-panelist, Stowe Boyd here. And actually, I was going to use one of Stowe's comments as the framing discussion for this. He made the comment that the central question of 2025 will be, what are people for in a world that does not need their labor and where only a minority are needed to guide the bot-based economy? So everyone who answered this question, whether they said it or not, sort of touched on this issue of what are humans good for? What value can we add as driverless cars and artificial intelligence and intelligent digital agents start being able to do more and more things that people currently do? And there are a few sort of key issues that I want to just touch on very briefly, and then we can move on to the Q&A. So on one end of this question, there was a group of people that were, fairly optimistic about this, actually, and they made a few points. One of the most interesting, I think, was this notion that, machines are great at lots of things. Obviously, they can, if you need to analyze a lot of data, a machine's going to be great for that. If you need to do sort of a repetitive task over and over again, a machine's going to be really great at that. But humans have our own sort of unique skills and benefits. We're empathetic. We can be creative. We can exercise judgment and critical thinking. We can interact with each other in a one-on-one setting in a way that a machine cannot do. So there was, for the group of people who was, sort of optimistic about our role in this world, their point was basically that we're going to do what we're best at, and the things that maybe we're not good at, we're going to turn that over to a digital agent. So in my world, I'm going to maybe spend less time working with data sets in a statistical analysis package and much more time really thinking about the meaning of what those numbers are and coming out and doing presentations like this. So there's this notion that we can offload the things that are cognitively difficult for us to do and do our own jobs or the sort of the human parts of our jobs that much better. On the other end of this, there was a group of people that I think sort of Stowe falls into this category, but there was a great quote from a gentleman named Jerry Michalski who said, "Automation is Voldemort, the terrifying force no one is willing to name." And this group really looked at the future and had some real concerns about this next generation of technological development and how that's going to impact us. They made a couple of sort of key points in that area. The first of which is that this is going to impact people that it hasn't impacted before. So previous technological revolutions largely moved people from one form of unskilled labor to another. This is going to be impacting knowledge workers, white-collar workers, other forms of skilled labor that haven't really had to deal with this in the past. And more to the point, it's going to be doing that really, really quickly. So, it seems like a couple years ago, everyone was, sort of laughing at Google at how crazy it was that they were trying to build cars that could drive on their own, right? Now I'm seeing think pieces about how, Uber's long-term goal is that they're going to own fleets of driverless cars in every major city in the United States. None of us are going to own cars, and we're all just going to take driverless Ubers wherever we go. So there was this sense that not only is it going to be impacting people who haven't been impacted before, but it's going to be impacted at a pace that makes it very difficult for them to retrain, to gain new skills, to educate themselves for the next level in their careers, and that we're going to wind up with a small number of people who succeed really, really well in this new environment, and a larger number of people who are really struggling to get by and operating kind of at the margins of employment. So those were kind of the polls. There was another group in the middle that made sort of an interesting kind of potpourri of comments, really oriented around this notion of this is an opportunity for us, and it's an opportunity for us to reinvent what we think about the nature of work. And so that took a few different forms. There was this notion that we can use this to have more quote-unquote jobs, or fewer jobs, but the same amount of work. So does it make sense for one person to be working for 40 hours a week and another person to be working 0 hours a week, when each of those people could work 10 hours, spend the other 30 doing the things they actually like to do, and have a machine do all of the sort of day-to-day grunt work? That would make everyone better off in the long run. Pivoting off of Arun's, for those who were here for the first session this morning, there were a lot of people who predicted that we're all going to be members of the peer-to-peer marketplace that Arun mentioned this morning, that we're going to see this explosion in small-scale, artisanal, sort of almost pre-industrial production models as a way for humans to differentiate themselves. So we'll have the machines doing the sort of the mass production, all the rest of us doing kind of small-scale piecework. And of course, it wouldn't be a discussion of technology in the year 2014 without someone predicting a backlash against something that hasn't happened yet. There was another group of people who actually predicted that we'll see a revolt against the sort of the machine and robot movement, and we'll see for me who grew up in the 80s, we had "Made in the USA" tags on all our shirts. They predicted that we'll see a "Made by a Human" tags instead, and that we'll see a much greater popularity in things like not just handmade goods, but outdoor activities, nature, human sports, other types of machine-free zones. So we saw a really wide range of responses. The report goes well beyond that, and I tried to keep this to a minimum of 5 minutes, but ultimately, people are really divided on how this is going to play out, but they all sort of went back to this same notion of we sort of have a choice of where we go from here. And so Jason Ponton, who's the editor-in-chief of the MIT Technology Review, made the statement that all of this is manageable by states and economies, but it will require wrestling with ideological fraught solutions, such as a guaranteed minimum income and broadening our social sense of what is valuable work. So there was this sense that the technology is going one way, but we as a society have the ability to determine whether we wind up on this end, that end, or somewhere in between. So hopefully that gives us enough time to have a nice little discussion about where we're heading, and I look forward to taking part. Thank
you, Aaron. How does that, so for everyone in the room, does that make you feel more positive, more optimistic? Hands up. 2.5 people. So everybody else, but who's willing to sort of share what are your reactions when you hear what Aaron has just talked about? Anyone?
Most of us are going to have to take that route.
Gentleman in the back. And you reference that because of Aaron's comment about when Aaron talked about the small artisanal models. That's kind of what we were doing in the 1600s, 1700s, 1500s.
And that was actually a part that if I had had 10 minutes, I would have included that. That was a big theme by a large group of the folks I talked to, that this is just how economies work. Disruptive technologies come through.
Except this is a completely different technology. This is where you're talking about the work is being done, but it's being done by robots. It's not being eliminated. It's not being ephemeralized. It's not like we're not doing it anymore. It's going to be more like, imagine a world where we had industrialized agriculture but no other work to do. So yeah, there's only 1% of the population that needs to do agriculture today, but there's no other jobs. Imagine that. That's the problem we're confronted. Now, I do want to make a point, because I come across often as seeming like the one who's the biggest fear monger in the crowd. I was just talking about this earlier with Eric. I think there's some things that human beings are really bad at that we might want to use algorithmic reasoning or AI to do for us. It turns out, for example, people are really bad at hiring other people. We have a long list of cognitive biases, and we really can't necessarily balance the number of factors that might go into determining who's a good job candidate or bad. And so I think that's one area of real interest, that there are some things that human beings are innately not very good at, and we should get machines to do it for us. But then there are other things that still in this time, even with Watson grade intelligences and so on, although Deep Blue can beat the best human chess players, they can't beat a team of human beings who use computer programs to play chess. The best freestyling chess is done by teams of human beings with computers together, and they will beat Deep Blue, okay? Computers, for example, today can't win at Go against the best Go players in the world. The nature of the problem set of Go is very creative, let's say. And so the best Go players cannot even tell you why they know to put that stone where they do. They don't know why they know to do it. So there's still places where it's like Blaise Pascal said, you know, the heart has its reasons that reason knows not. So there are still things that people can do that aren't reducible to the kind of moving parts that AI will handle. But at the same time, the great majority of what goes on in work today doesn't fall into those categories. And so we're at a very interesting time, a very big dilemma, and I think it has to be handled sociologically. That you know, we'll have to, as nations, one nation at a time, figure out what we're going to do, because otherwise we'll have 80% or more of the workforce.
Eric, I want to get your reaction.
Yeah, so I think you've touched on two issues that I want to highlight a little bit. Does everybody hear that feedback?
Yeah, I think it's because you're into the speaker.
Oh, I figured it was because the AI technology guy is going to sound more like the robot. But the first one is this premise that in the future it will be robots that have the power and humans serving them. Today, we are very much at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is the humans have the power, and how do we build technologies that serve the humans and support that? And I was talking with Chitra, and in particular, we think about how do we extend and scale human expertise and address all of these cognitive overload problems? How do we give people access to information at the time they need it, when they need it, and in a way that they can leverage it and exploit it in the most efficient way possible? And to your point, in a collaborative way, so that you leverage the strengths of both of those elements, because a computer will have certain strengths to deal with enormous amounts of data. It struggles to understand natural language, and that's really the thing that I've focused on in my career, is how to develop analytics and techniques that can have computers understand natural human language. We as humans do that very easily. It's surprisingly hard to write algorithms and analytics that can do that half as good as a human can. So this notion of leveraging the strengths of the parties to create a collaborative system, I think, is where we're currently focused.
But so 2 points then to follow on that, Eric. How will that human-robot collaboration evolve? And in the future, will it come to a point where, as we see in some movies, where the robot then is the higher species and human is sub to that?
My initial reaction to that is we'll never evolve to that point. I mean, remember, it's the humans that are creating the computers, and so we ultimately have control over our destiny. But I think we will see these repeating elements of history where, as technology comes in and some jobs become more automated, they'll be replaced by other kinds of jobs. You know, even in agriculture, let's take carpentry. You know, carpenters used to use hand tools, and maybe you needed a whole bunch of carpenters to build a house. Today, you can use a much smaller number of carpenters with power tools. And so with better tools, the human becomes more efficient, but there's still an essential element in that relationship.
But then when we talk about specifically then those job categories for humans, So what are those categories? You talk about the future of work being networked, post-normal, loose. What does that really mean? And how does that flow through to jobs on the ground, either blue collar or white collar?
Well, a pair of researchers at Oxford did a study last year, and they determined, based on their assessment of the capabilities of modern robotics, that roughly, I think it was 47%, roughly 50% of occupations are at risk of being taken over by robots and AI. So that's a broad spectrum. Almost anything with the word operator in it, for example, is going to be in the hands of robots instead of people in the future. But a long, long list of things. Things like healthcare, actually. They believed in this study, they said at a relatively near term, in the next 5 or 10 years, robotic helpers, nurses, will be able to do quite a lot for people. And it's probably a good thing because we have a rapidly aging population. And we're not going to have enough caregivers, perhaps, to handle all the baby boomers in 15 years that need help. So it'll be helpful to have a Roomba kind of device that will come and give you your pills at the appropriate time, or help you get, stand up if you can't get out of your chair. That's all to the good, but the remaining people that aren't, retirees who need the help of a robot, it's going to be problematic if, in fact, large swaths of the current day employment is completely gone, and there isn't some alternative new kind of work. However, I want to make a case, and this sounds a little science fiction-y, but I'm a futurist, so I can get away with it. Imagine in the future the economics of what things are going to cost when all of the labor is pulled out of the supply chain. That is, it's being done by robots, so you don't have to pay the guy to unload the hamburgers and put them in the freezer at McDonald's, and you don't have to pay a human being to flip the burgers. The hamburger might cost 5 cents instead of $1.50. So it's conceivable that the economic impacts of this are so vast that we could, in fact, tolerate all these people who we have no use for, as I said in that question. What are we going to do when they don't have any labor inputs any longer? They're not actually in the labor force. But it may be very inexpensive to keep all those people doing things. And I have always got this image of the guy who takes over his, he gets, because things are relatively inexpensive, maybe the property costs will go down. He could buy, 5 acres of land and have a robotic helper, and he can raise his own crop of food, right? And, the robot does 99% of the work. So he could, instead of buying food from the supermarket, he'd be growing his own food. So it could be a very different way that we would be living our lives, and maybe, a minimum wage that would be very modest would keep people, afloat. We'll have to see, but when you suck all the costs out of delivering all the goods, and most of the cost is people, then, everything will be different.
But then, Aaron, where does that leave the people? What should we, so whether there's boys and girls in school, what should they be studying? What should us as adults be, and then how do the academic and social infrastructure in the nation respond to that? Because now they say the United States has a competitiveness issue. There's a skills gap, especially when it comes to this middle type of definition of gap. So not the higher white collar or multiple degrees folks, but the 2-year associate's degree kind of related jobs. And so how do we prepare ourselves to shift the workforce and reconcile with already a lack of competitiveness?
Right. Well, and that's one of the challenges both for the educational system and also for the people who are, entering the workforce to contend with. Because this is moving so fast, how do you predict, what job or career you want to enter if you, don't know, if in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years that job category is even going to exist in a meaningful way. So there was, one quote in the responses we got where, they were really pitying the, the college graduates of today, trying to game this out and come up with a career path that would, still be there for them when they're, in their 30s or 40s. And so I think, again, what it falls back on is, to the extent that, we can focus on, those human attributes like, creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, you're going to have a better chance of being well placed for this. But certainly it's going to be a challenge both for the educational system and the political system as a whole, as well as the poor people who are trying to figure out what route they want to take with minimal disruption.
But I'm going to poke at you some more, right, Aaron? Well, but I want some. What are some ideas, some solutions for us? And the other thing is, Stowe just said earlier that when it goes to recruiting staff, sometimes humans don't make the best decision, and that's an area where robotics could come in. But to counter that, or at the same time, it is said that humans' strength is judgment, empathy, critical thinking, which you can't necessarily replicate in a robot.
Right, and so any of those jobs, whether healthcare was actually a good example of one where yeah, exactly. A robot can give you your pills. It can make sure that you're checking your blood pressure at the appropriate time. It can't make you feel better about yourself. It can't make sure that you're doing okay or help you feel better if you're not doing so well. So those types of jobs, things in the service industry that require a high degree of human contact. There was actually this notion that what we'll see in people there is. Inequality was a real theme of this, and there was a very strong theme where a lot of people kind of spun this out and said we're going to basically in the future human interaction is going to be a luxury good. So Judith Donath at the Harvard Berkman Center made the great quote that where she compared the human silk or the silk of human interaction compared to the polyester of robot service, and so she sees this world where the wealthy are able to afford, a human driver, a human option on the customer service line when they call in, while the rest of us are going to be walking around eating 5-cent burgers and interacting with the robot customer service line, right? In terms of jobs where humans are going to have that role, anything that involves that close personal interaction, that close social interaction, those qualities like empathy are going to be ones that are at least relatively well insulated, it seems like, based on the comments that we got back.
Well, on this point of inequality, Eric, in terms of IBM and large companies, do they care about this inequality, or is that just another area for them to leverage and squeeze profitability? And the second part is, how are large companies starting to prepare themselves for this inevitable?
Right. So I think the inequality is a conjecture. So I'm not going to try to answer that yet. But I think one way that we are trying to prepare for this, or very concerned about it, is back to this notion of education. And how do you prepare people so that they can take advantage of new opportunities? And so just as there's concern about how to pick a job that is going to be around in 10 or 15 years, 10 or 15 years ago, there wasn't a job for iOS app developer. So there's always going to be new jobs that replace these old ones. And when it comes to education, I think focusing on things that are foundational and broadly applicable can be extremely valuable. So we're particularly interested in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that's one area that, at least for the foreseeable future, is guaranteed to provide you with a pretty good career. That said, the ability of humans to think critically and do complex problem solving is, I think, unmatched by artificial intelligence. And I also personally strongly support liberal arts. In spite of all of my example as a computer scientist, my son is now a freshman at a liberal arts school studying international politics and economics.
This liberal arts major agrees.
And I was going to say before we close, just we spent a lot of time talking about how this impacts the future of work. Just a quick final point, and I'll go to Stowe here on how this impacts the future of social relationships, sexual activity, relationships with mom and dad. How does this some quick thoughts there, Stowe, before we close?
Well, actually, a recent poll showed that as many as 40 to 50% of people would have sex with a robot. So people are willing to give it a try, and actually, you know, there are some demonstrations available that you can see on the internet that show that, yes, you can put an Oculus headset on and literally feel like you're having sex with some avatar. I mean, that is available today. That's not a futures at all. So I'd say it's inevitable that even the oldest profession can be ephemeralized. So yes, robotic sex is here to stay.
And on that
we have
note,
to leave it.
and on that note,